In our headlines on this Thursday, November 20th, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung is in Egypt, the second leg of his four-nation 10-day tour of the Arab world and Africa, and poised to promote tangible projects between Seoul and Cairo during summit talks today. Meanwhile, the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly endorses a resolution rejecting North Korea's rampant human rights abuses with the support of 61 member states, including South Korea, but some pundits here are casting doubt over Seoul's backing of the bill next year. And the South Korean stock market rebounds above the 4,000 mark during trade on this Thursday, with investors responding favorably to a better-than-expected revenue report by U.S. tech giant NVIDIA. President Lee Jae-myung is in Egypt and scheduled to sit down with his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah El-Sisi later on this Thursday for talks on issues of mutual interest. Arirang's Yoon Jung-min reports from Cairo.
President Lee Jae-myung has landed in Egypt for a three-day official visit, the second leg of his four-nation trip to the Middle East and Africa, having wrapped up his trip to the UAE. He will meet the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi on Thursday for talks on cooperation on trade, education, and culture.
Egypt is an important international logistics hub linking Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and also is our comprehensive cooperative partner.
Seoul and Cairo celebrate 3 decades of their diplomatic ties this year. The South Korean leader will also deliver a speech at Cairo University on the country's vision in the Middle East before heading to South Africa for the G20 summit. He will then depart for Turkey, the final leg of his 10-day-long trip, for talks with its President Recep Tayyip Erdogan before heading home next week.
The president's trip to Egypt signals the start of fully fledged diplomacy with the Middle East region, say top office officials, with the aim of expanding Korea's diplomatic horizon. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Cairo.
And President Lee Jae-myung says South Korea is the most reliable partner to promote Egypt's Vision 2030, the country's long-term strategy for sustainable growth. In an op-ed published Thursday in Egypt's Al-Ahram newspaper, President Lee added that expanded cooperation in the economy, culture and peace will help build a better tomorrow for both countries. In particular, he shared hopes of strengthening what he called their peace partnership for the Korean Peninsula through exchange expansion, relationship normalization, and denuclearization. The president made note of Egypt's unwavering support of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And Egypt's top diplomat to South Korea believes the upcoming summit talks between Seoul and Cairo will pave the path to tangible projects. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young met up with him.
Seoul and Cairo are embarking on a new phase of strategic partnership with room for collaboration on infrastructure, AI and culture. That's according to Khaled Abdel Rahman, who is Egyptian ambassador to Seoul since 2022.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations this year. It's an important visit after a phone call between the two leaders of the countries, and they have agreed on the main topics of cooperation. The political will for both leaders are very strong, very visible, and I think they will be transformed into tangible, real projects that benefit both Egypt and Korea.
A major pillar of this cooperation could be energy and industrial technology. Korean companies are expanding across Egypt's manufacturing, renewable energy and power plant sectors. Last year, SK Ecoplant signed a $1.9 billion renewable energy development project. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power won a contract to supply components for Egypt's first nuclear power plant in El Daba.
So definitely there is room for collaboration between Egyptian and Korean companies, and the expertise and know-how here is very important because we see the partnership between our two countries as a springboard for Africa. So we can use that collaboration to enter into other African markets concerning green energy and renewables.
Egypt is a regional trade hub with its Suez Canal, the Suez Canal Economic Zone, and free trade agreements with Europe, Africa, and the Arab world. Especially at a time of fractured supply chains, the ambassador says the two countries are genuine partners.
So from that, you can export and you can benefit from the low tariff rates and the reduction of time to travel to the destination where you want to sell your goods. So this is also, I mean, you can take a flight from Egypt to many European destinations within 3-4 hours. So air transport is also possible, not only by sea. So also Egyptian airports are now open for public and private partnership, and especially the private sector. And I'm hearing good news that one of the Korean companies might be managing one of our airports that are open for foreign investors.
The ambassador suggested that joint production in Egypt is the next step for a win-win partnership.
We are presenting Egypt as a regional partner for Korea to work in other countries in the region. And I must say here, for the rehabilitation, reconstruction in Gaza, this is a very good opportunity for collaboration of Korean companies, Egyptian companies, to work to rebuild the lives of the Palestinian people. And also we are building new cities, smart cities. And I think this is the strong point with Korea, with AI, and His Excellency President Lee has allocated a very big budget for the AI. And we would like to be partners in that and to really build new cities that can cater for the needs of the next generation.
Cultural exchange is also expanding, especially as Egypt has opened the largest museum in the world dedicated to a single civilization, housing over 100,000 artifacts, showing how ancient Egypt contributed to the world, from prehistory to the Greek and Roman periods.
This shows that Egypt is part of the international community, and this is what we are trying to say to the world, that peace is important, culture is important, and we have to know our history and our roots. And being the oldest country in the world, we are inviting all Koreans to come and to share the modern Egypt now, because this museum is a modern building, hosting an ancient civilization.
And as he reflects on his 4 years in Seoul, the ambassador says the human connection between Egyptians and Koreans, especially youth, is what will stay with him most.
One of my most satisfiable moments was when I was seeing Egyptian and Korean people engaging together, be it in commercial activities or in culture or in art or even in sports, So this experience has really enriched my diplomatic career, which has been going on for the past 34 years.
As the ambassador's lasting legacy, direct flights between Seoul and Cairo will launch next year. He says he hopes people-to-people exchanges will continue to grow as the two countries broaden their cooperation. Arirang, Arirang News.
In New York earlier on Wednesday, a UN committee endorsed a resolution rejecting North Korea's rampant human rights abuses with the support of 61 member states, including South Korea. But some pundits here casting a shadow over Seoul's backing of the bill next year. Our correspondent Kim Bo-kyung explains.
The UN General Assembly's third committee has adopted a North Korean human rights resolution for the 21st consecutive year. Co-sponsored by South Korea and 60 other countries, the resolution condemning the regime's human rights violations was adopted by consensus on Wednesday local time without a vote, and then was forwarded to the General Assembly plenary session. The latest resolution expressed deep concern about the grave human rights violations by the regime and the lack of accountability for human rights violations and abuses. It also condemned the reclusive state for diverting excessive resources to military expenditure and its illegal nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs rather than securing welfare. South Korea was one of the first 41 member states supporting the draft resolution, though there have been speculation that the liberal government led by President Lee Jae-myung might not join, as it aims to push for dialogue with Pyongyang. South Korea continued to co-sponsor the resolution from 2008 to 2018, but under the Moon Jae-in administration between 2019 and 2022, it withdrew, citing concerns about the impact on inter-Korean relations. Seoul rejoined in 2023 under the previous Yoon Suk-yeol administration. One expert says though Seoul maintained its position to back the resolution, this could change next year.
The government has been sending conciliatory messages to North Korea, hoping for a summit with Kim Jong-un or some form of exchange and cooperation. But the issue North Korea reacts most sensitively to is the UN resolution on human rights. Since this goes against the direction of the government's current policy, there's a high chance that they may not take part next year.
The expert added that this year is the first year of the administration, and sorting out its stance regarding North Korea's human rights could have come a bit too early. But there is a chance South Korea could withdraw from backing the resolution next year. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, the South Korean stock market rebounded above the 4,000 mark on this Thursday, with investors responding enthusiastically to a better-than-expected revenue report by U.S. tech giant NVIDIA. Our correspondent Park Chun-han reports.
On Thursday, South Korea's benchmark KOSPI soared by 1.92% to close above the critical 4,000 mark. Specifically, shares in South Korea's tech titans, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, were up 4.25% and 1.6% respectively from Wednesday's close. This reaction came after the world's largest chipmaker, NVIDIA, reported earnings higher than estimates, shrugging off concerns about an AI bubble. NVIDIA's outperforming earnings shifted global market sentiment from skepticism to optimism, driven by company CEO Jensen Huang's remarks that AI demand remains strong. The U.S. chip giant reported a record $57 billion in quarterly revenue, exceeding estimates by nearly $2 billion, and forecast even stronger growth to reach $65 billion in its next quarterly earnings report. Over the past few weeks, some mega-hedge funds have bet against AI-related stocks, and some investors have questioned whether the astronomical capital spending on AI infrastructure will ever bring matching profits. As investor sentiment changed, global stocks indices reacted to the news overnight. Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 2.65% on Thursday, while the United States tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 futures, as of 3:30 p.m. Korean Standard Time, is recording a jump of 1.8% since its close on Wednesday. Now, investors' attention is turning to the U.S. Federal Reserve, as the CME Group's FedWatch indicates a 70% chance that the central bank will maintain its current interest rate level of 3.75% to 4%. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to strongly urge the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. In a recent speech, he even quipped to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that if he doesn't press Fed Chair Jerome Powell to act faster on cuts, he will be fired. Trump has long argued that slashing rates is essential to stimulate economic growth and ease borrowing costs for consumers and companies. Park Chun-han, Arirang News.
And now, local news headlines about historic market rallies are fueling a disturbing phenomenon among individual investors, some of whom rake up debt to invest in stocks. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon takes a look.
Despite recent market corrections to major domestic semiconductor stocks, the fervor for what's known as bittu, or debt-fueled stock investment, is intensifying. This sentiment has been fueled by the recent KOSPI bull market, which has encouraged retail investors to leverage their positions. According to the Korea Financial Investment Association, as of the 17th, the outstanding credit balance in the domestic stock market hit an all-time high of 26.6029 trillion won. Of this total, the volume of debt-fueled investment in the KOSPI market stood at 16.7432 trillion won. This is also clear with two of the KOSPI's biggest names. As of the 18th, The outstanding margin loan balance for SK Hynix surpassed 1.14 trillion won. This marks a substantial 43% increase compared to the end of last month. For Samsung Electronics, the balance reached 1.438 trillion won, representing a 41% jump over the same period. This aggressive borrowing behavior is clearly visible in the banking sector. Data shows that other loans from the banking sector alone jumped by 1.4 trillion won last month. This marks the sharpest monthly increase since July 2021. It is a significant reversal, considering these loans, often used as seed money for stocks, had been on a downward trend for the previous 3 months.
If you take out a loan at a high interest rate of 10% and the stock drops by 30%, you are essentially facing a total loss of 40%. Brokerages typically lend up to twice the amount of capital you hold. For this very reason, it is best to invest in stocks using your own available cash flow.
This surge indicates that small investors are taking on significant leverage from banks to buy into the dip. Addressing these concerns, the Financial Services Commission Chairman Lee Yeok-won stated last week that the current situation is manageable. He assessed that the recent rise in credit loans does not yet threaten the overall soundness of the financial system. In fact, despite the recent spike, total credit loans across the entire financial sector have actually decreased by 2 trillion won so far this year. However, authorities stress that this macro stability does not eliminate personal risks. The chairman emphasized that Bit2 investment must be strictly managed within a range that the investor can personally handle. To ensure this, the regulator this week switched its position. Its monitoring system for margin lending will be on a daily basis. The regulator is now balancing a cautious observation of the market with a readiness to intervene if volatility expands further. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And US President Donald Trump has highlighted yet again the importance of hosting skilled foreign technicians to train American workers. He also found fault with the crackdown on South Korean technicians in Georgia in early September. Our Lee Seung-jae covers his latest remarks.
U.S. President Donald Trump is once again underscoring the need for skilled foreign workers to support American industry, even as some of his right-wing supporters continue to oppose the idea of foreigners taking American jobs. Speaking at the U.S.-Saudi Arabia Investment Forum on Wednesday, Trump argued that foreign specialists are essential for training American workers and keeping major investment projects on track.
But if you have to bring people to get those plants opened, we want you to do that, and we want those people to teach our people how to make computer chips and how to make other things.
Trump also referenced the high-profile immigration raid in September at a Korean battery factory construction site in Georgia. More than 300 Korean workers were detained during that operation, raising concerns among investors about whether the U.S. could still be considered a reliable destination for large-scale manufacturing projects. Trump said the raid interrupted a billion-dollar project involving highly complex and hazardous battery production techniques. He added that the workers involved were essential for launching the facility and transferring advanced manufacturing skills. The U.S. leader described telling officials at the time to stop the enforcement action, adding that the crisis was resolved and that Korean engineers are now training American workers to run the plant. Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration may delay the sweeping semiconductor tariffs that the president has repeatedly announced over the past several months. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, U.S. officials have quietly informed both government and private sector stakeholders that the tariffs may not be imposed in the near future. Trump originally declared in August that the United States would levy tariffs of approximately 100% on all imported semiconductors and integrated circuits, while exempting companies building or planning to build chip-making plants on American soil. Reuters notes that geopolitical and economic factors appear to be driving the hesitation. Analysts warn that implementing high semiconductor tariffs could reignite tensions in the U.S.-China trade relationship, potentially provoking China to revive its rare earth export controls. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The U.S. midterm elections are set to take place next November, and a new survey shows over half of the American respondents backing a Democratic candidate. The public poll by PBS News and NPR reveals 55% of registered American voters casting their ballot for a Democrat if they were to vote right then. In contrast, 41% said they would vote for a Republican. The Democrats' double-digit lead marks the largest since 2017. Among independents, the Democrats have a 33-point advantage over the Republicans. Back here in South Korea, all 267 passengers and crew members aboard a ferry were rescued after the vessel ran aground off the country's southwestern coast late Wednesday. Now, everyone on board the Queen Genevieve II was transferred safely to a nearby port on Coast Guard and support vessels. The Coast Guard deployed 17 patrol ships, 4 coastal vessels, a plane and special personnel as part of its rescue mission. The ferry struck an uninhabited islet called Chok near Changsan Island a little after 8 p.m. The ship was traveling from Jeju Island to the port city of Mokpo.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Ukraine, at least 26 people were killed in an attack on the western city of Ternopil after Russia launched a large-scale barrage of drones and missiles across the country on Wednesday. Ukrainian officials say at least 3 children were among the dead, while 100 people were injured as 2 residential buildings in the city were struck in the attack. Authorities placed all of Ukraine under air raid alerts as explosions were reported in Ternopil and Lviv. The Energy Ministry reported emergency power outages in several regions. President Vladimir Zelensky, who was in Turkey for talks on ending the war, said Russia used more than 470 drones and 48 missiles in the assault and called for stronger air defense support from allies. The strike comes as Ukraine warned that Moscow has intensified daily attacks on civilian and energy infrastructure ahead of winter. The United Kingdom says that within the last few weeks, what it describes as Russian spy ship has used lasers to disrupt military pilots tracking its movements near UK waters. The UK says any interference with British pilots poses a direct security risk. Britain's Defense Secretary John Healey called the action, quote, deeply dangerous. He said the Royal Navy and RAF Poseidon aircraft were following the ship closely and warned that the UK has military options ready should the Yantar change course. The Yantar is part of Russia's Deep Sea Research Unit, which is suspected of underwater surveillance. The Russian embassy denies threatening UK interests. In New York, a Gustav Klimt portrait set a new record for modern art after being sold at Sotheby's for $236.4 million. The work, Portrait of Elizabeth Lauder, painted between 1914 and 1916, once helped its Jewish subjects survive during the Holocaust. Lauder used the artwork to support her claim that Klimt, who was not Jewish, was her father, allowing her to avoid capture by the Nazis. Sotheby's did not identify the buyer. The portrait came from the collection of Leonard A. Lauder, who died this year. In total, 5 Klimt pieces from his collection have sold for $392 million. 주지현, Arirang News.
The coldest is off today and the season clock has returned to its place. At this time, Seoul skies are clear and there's some lovely late autumn weather. In the middle of the day, it was 2 to 6 degrees Celsius higher than yesterday in most areas, including 14 degrees in Seoul, 16 degrees in Poryang. The daily temperature range has widened to as much as 20 degrees in Kimcheon. Please take care of your health in this weather. A dry weather advisory continues around the East Coast for areas with gusty winds. As there is a high risk of wildfires, it is important to take extra precautions. Morning will stay cold at 1 degree in Seoul, 4 degrees in Gwangju. As the day goes on, highs will rise up to double digits, reaching 11 to 15 degrees all over the country. Typical autumn weather for this time of year is expected without much cold until the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.